The Gulf War was the first major conflict of the post-Cold War era. It was a turning point that reshaped global military strategy, political influence, and the role of the United States and the United Nations in a new world order. In this video, we'll deeply explore its origins, military operations, global consequences, and long-lasting impact. This wasn't just a battle over oil, it was a showdown that defined the dawn of a new century. To understand the Gulf War, we have to rewind to the end of the Cold War. As the Soviet Union crumbled, the bipolar world order vanished. The United States emerged as the sole global superpower, a unipolar moment that changed everything. But while the West celebrated, the Middle East was a powder keg of political and economic tension. One of the key players was Iraq, led by Saddam Hussein. The country was exhausted and deeply in debt after the brutal 8-year war with Iran. Saddam's regime was on the brink of economic collapse, and he was desperate. He saw his wealthy neighbor Kuwait as both a solution and a target. Accused Kuwait of slant drilling into Iraqi oil fields and overproducing oil, which drove down prices and hurt Iraq's economy. He also claimed Kuwait was historically part of Iraq, a convenient justification for his ambitions. On August 2, 1990, the world watched in shock as Iraqi forces invaded and swiftly occupied Kuwait. The move sent shockwaves across the globe, threatening to destabilize the entire Middle East and disrupt the world's oil supply. This wasn't just a regional dispute anymore. It was an international crisis. The global response was swift and almost unanimous. The United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 6000, condemning the invasion and demanding an immediate Iraqi withdrawal. When Saddam refused, the international community, led by the United States, began to form an unprecedented coalition. Over 30 countries, from the UK and France to Egypt and Syria, joined forces against Iraq. This wasn't just about liberating Kuwait. It was about upholding a new principle of international law in the post-Cold War world. Sanctions were imposed, diplomatic channels were exhausted, but Saddam wouldn't budge. A military confrontation seemed inevitable. The first phase of the response was Operation Desert Shield. This was a massive defensive buildup to protect Saudi Arabia, another key oil producer and a vital U.S. ally, from a potential Iraqi invasion. What followed was one of the largest and fastest military deployments in history. Hundreds of thousands of troops, along with tanks, planes, and warships, poured into the Gulf region. It was a logistical marvel, showcasing the incredible power and reach of the U.S. military and its allies. For months, the world held its breath as this powerful force assembled in the desert, a clear message to Saddam Hussein: get out of Kuwait or face the consequences. When the January 15, 1991 deadline for withdrawal passed, the world knew war was coming. On January 17th, Operation Desert Storm began. It started not with soldiers, but with a storm of fire from the sky. The coalition launched the largest air campaign since World War II. Relentless, 42-day bombardment of Iraqi military targets, infrastructure, and command centers. This was a new kind of war. We saw the debut of advanced military technology on a massive scale. Stealth aircraft like the F-117 Nighthawk slipped through Iraqi defenses undetected. Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from hundreds of miles away struck their targets with pinpoint accuracy. This was the first major showcase of precision-guided munitions, forever changing the face of warfare. And for the first time, war was broadcast live into living rooms around the world. CNN reporters in Baghdad, like Bernard Shaw and Peter Arnett, gave real-time updates as bombs fell around them. This televised war created a powerful, immediate, and sometimes sanitized view of the conflict, shaping public perception in a way that had never been seen before. After weeks of air attacks had crippled Iraq's military capabilities, the ground war began on February 24, 1991. The coalition's ground offensive was designed to be swift and overwhelming. Forces stormed across the Saudi border into Kuwait and southern Iraq, executing a massive left-hook maneuver that encircled the Iraqi army. The Iraqi forces, demoralized and battered by the air campaign, quickly collapsed. The ground war was astonishingly short, lasting only about 100 hours. Kuwait was liberated, and a ceasefire was declared on February 28th. As Iraqi troops fled Kuwait, they were targeted by coalition aircraft along a stretch of road that became infamously known as the Highway of Death. The disparity in casualties was staggering. The coalition suffered very few losses, while tens of thousands of Iraqi soldiers were casualties. It was a decisive and overwhelming military victory. The geopolitical consequences were immense. The Gulf War solidified America's position as the world's undisputed military and political superpower. It also revitalized the authority of the United Nations, proving it could mobilize a global coalition to enforce international law. For Iraq, the defeat led to years of crippling sanctions, internal rebellions that were brutally suppressed by Saddam, and a long-term U.S. military presence in the region. Militarily, the war was a revolution. It proved the dominance of air power and technology-driven warfare. The Powell Doctrine, which emphasizes using overwhelming force to achieve clear political objectives, became the blueprint for future U.S. military interventions. However, the decision to leave Saddam Hussein in power, though intended to avoid a power vacuum, planted the seeds for future conflicts, ultimately leading to the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The Gulf War taught the world many lessons. It showed the incredible effectiveness of modern military technology, but also the limitations of military power in achieving long-term political stability. The phenomenon of the televised war raised new questions about media, propaganda, and the public's relationship with conflict. It redefined military strategy, political alliances, and the balance of power in the Middle East for decades to come. The Gulf War was not just a military conflict over a small, oil-rich nation. It was a defining moment that closed the chapter on the Cold War and introduced a new, uncertain era of global politics and warfare. Its shockwaves are still felt today, shaping the world we live in. If you found this deep dive into history interesting, please give this video a like, share it with others, and hit that subscribe button for more in-depth documentaries. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.